Okay, everyone, welcome to the last class of the semester. We're looking at Chapter 34 module, and one of the nice things about this module is you're going to get to play with the database. Now, it's important to understand that during this class we have really focused on Java and we haven't done a lot about the database side of things. And I think a lot of that is because we wanted to talk about making sure you are a great Java programmer. And one of the aspects, though, of being a great Java programmer is the database side of things. So now we've been working so hard on Java, and we want to make sure you knew everything you needed to know about Java, which takes a lot of time. And now we're going to squeeze the last week around database. What I would tell you is if you are dedicated to becoming a programmer, you're going to want to take this chapter and really go through it. Make sure you really take time, even if that's after your assignment's done and the class is done, you definitely want to go back and take some time to really go through this chapter and really play with SQL and get comfortable with SQL. It is definitely a big part of what goes on with development. In fact, very little development occurs without some database, whether it be an actual database, whether it be a data file. Without data, you're not doing a whole lot with programming. So it's really important to understand that. Now, as we talk about that, and if you look at your chapter notes, right away we start talking about a database. So before we do that, we need to jump in and actually install MySQL. I'm not going to go through that process because the documents online on how to do this are really well done. It takes you through it. The most current version is 8.0.18, but it's not such a big change to the version being shown here that a new instruction sheet needs to be done. Walk through this, do the instructions, every instruction on the sheet just as it is, including all the way down here when you're actually going to log in and you're going to create a user. Make sure you're looking at the book when you're doing this. It also helps. And then you're going to continue doing all these processes. This will help you get everything set up. And then at some point, you need to download the script file and log in as Scott and run that script file. This is going to create all the databases and tables that you're going to need for your example files. It will also install the file you're going to need for the homework. You will also need to install the connector J 8.0.13, which this is how you do that. It is how you install a jar file, and it will help you get through all of those pieces. And with that, one other thing I want to make sure I point out is that back on our assignment area, under assignment, it'll say how to add a jar file to your project. Make sure you open this, read this real quick, because you will need to add this jar file to your project, and so make sure you know how to do that. And it's the MySQL connector Java jar file. That's going to get you all set up for your Java project. All right, now we're going to get back to talking about the actual class material. So let's jump over the notes. And again, you want to make sure you're taking a good look at your notes and reading along with the chapter as that's getting done. So what is a relational database system? A relationship database system is what we typically use now when we're talking about SQL, or in our case, we're going to use MySQL, which is now an Oracle product as well. A table, so a database is going to have tables, which are relations, and a table is going to consist of records, and each record is going to have a column, a number of columns or fields. Now remember, most of you probably have already taken a SQL course, so this should be something that you're used to already. Now remember, SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It's the language we use to talk to the database. We are using particularly MySQL, which is a popular open source database. It's great because it's easy to download, it's somewhat light, it's not the fastest database out there, but for most people that are wanting to try to keep costs low and get something running up and quick, MySQL is a great product. Oracle bought MySQL, and there are some changes happening. As the notes say, we are concerned with that. Regarding that, we're hoping that they don't remove the fact that it's open source, but it is what it is for right now. And make sure you are up to speed on your SQL. Here is a great site to go and play with SQL and get to learn it a little bit. If you haven't taken SQL, and it's one of your class requirements, I most often, almost every semester, teach the Oracle's I just lost it. Hold on. So for those that haven't taken a SQL course and it's part of your requirements, just so everyone knows, I almost every semester teach the SQL course here at at SPC, and we teach Oracle, which is a great database as well. But whether we're using Oracle or SQL or MySQL, the underlying tenets of the course all work for all of them. So you can definitely take that course, and it's one of my favorite courses to teach. So look for me as a instructor on that. If you can't find me and you need to take that course, all of our instructors at SPC do a great job. All right, so here's some examples of what the database look like that have been loaded in. Kind of take a look at that, and as it says, poke around, play with it, make some sequels, but don't make any changes. If you make changes, you might mess up some of the examples, and so we want to make sure that those pieces are all intact. The next thing for us to talk about is JDBC. Now, JDBC is the core library for the Java SQL, and you're going to need to make sure that you have it included in your projects. It's the Stored Query Language library. So Windows uses the Open Database Connectivity, the ODBC API, for database access. Think of JDBC as ODBC for the Java platform. And so it's one of those things that you'll get comfortable with, and it's going to be an acronym if you're a programmer, especially in the Java world, that you will use all the time, JDBC. All right, so database access with Java. A database driver is needed. It's the software that handles the communication between a particular database and the Java program. We're going to use MySQL Connector J, the official JDBC driver for MySQL. It's in our zipped project in the lib folder. The driver name is MySQL Connector Java 8.0.13.jar. Again, even in here, we talk about how to add that jar file to your Eclipse path. So make sure you do that. Take a moment to do that. It will make your life a lot easier. The JDBC classes. So every JDBC application uses objects of objects from 4 JDBC interfaces. We have the driver. So each database vendor, MySQL, Oracle, has its own driver. The connector class object. This object provides a direct link to the database. And it's the driver manager class looks through a list of drivers for one that recognizes the specified URL. If it doesn't find one, it creates a connection and passes a connection object to the program. So again, you can go through all these, but it's important to understand that these lines of code that you're seeing here, the connection con equals driver manager get, this is the piece that drives that number. So number 2 is being driven by this line of code, this driver manager dot get connection. The statement object. So again, now that you've connected to the database, you have to make statements, and these are going to be your SQL statements. And then finally, you have the result set, which is when you execute your statement, the returning result set, which, by the way, you can use the object's next method to go row by row. And then the result set object, getString method, is used to access a particular field or column in that row. So let's try the SQL vehicle.java and see what that looks like. All right, so let's jump over to that code block. It is SQL Vehicle Java. Close that. We'll open this. We're going to go to sources, and we are going to do SQL Vehicle. Let me make sure that that's the... Yep, SQL Vehicle. Good. All right. So here in SQL Vehicle, let me just go ahead and run it real quick so you can see what it looks like. And right down here in our nice output console, we can see vehicle VINs along with the type, and the make of the model, the year, the color, and the amount. This is a great way, by the way, if you need to quickly see the vehicle database and what it looks like when you are doing your homework. This is a great way to just get a quick dump of that data. So let's talk about the code. Here we're creating our connection. So over here, make sure you can understand. So in this reference library, if we expand that, you'll see the MySQL connector Java 8.0.13 jar. This is what it's allowing us to connect to a SQL, the MySQL database. So we have a package up here of JDBC. We're importing the Java SQL Connect. And here we can actually get into the code. So we're going to set up a connection. And in that connection, now when you try to do a connection, you should put it in a try-catch. I believe actually you are... it's mandated because Java is a exception-based language, so it likes to, if something throws, it has the ability to throw an error, Java will make you put it in a try-catch. So here we're setting up that connection, and this is us actually getting the connection. So we're using the driver manager, and this is the important piece to this, is we are telling it where our database is. Now, if you installed everything based on the instructions, you won't need to change this. This is exactly where it's located, which is localhost on port 3306. And our username is root, and our password is sesame. And so there you go. That will get you connected to your database. If everything goes well, then we are going to print out to the console, database connected. If something goes wrong, then the catch statement will pick up and say cannot connect, and then you're done. So if you can't connect, make sure you've done all the instructions correctly. Make sure the instruction part down at the bottom where you actually connect to your database through a console and do a couple query commands just to make sure things are running well. You may have, I've had students that have had to uninstall MySQL and then reinstall MySQL, so that way they make sure that they do the instructions just as they are written, and then things work for them. Now, the next part is we're going to create a statement. So this is us creating the statement, and then in that statement we're going to actually specify a statement, which is the select star from product. For anyone that has been in my SQL class, we would know that the select star is not a very popular way to query a database. For now, we're doing it because it's quick and easy, and it doesn't truly matter. But in production systems, select star is not an appropriate selection. Now we're going to sit, because this executes going to return a result set, which is that fourth thing that we talked about, that fourth step. And with that, we can now iterate through those record sets by using next. Now remember, the record set comes back, the pointer to the data set is actually before the first record. That's why you have to first call next to even get to the first record. This is great because you can use it with the while statement. You don't have to prime the loop. It's all ready to go. The first time you run the next, it'll put you to the first record, and then it's going to output everything, and then it's going to keep going until it runs out of records. If something happens during this process, again, our catch statement will pick it up. It will output oops, and then it will tell us what the actual exception message is. There you go. Once we run it, as you can see, we have this database, and we get a quick dump of all the records in the database. All right, let's go back to our notes. Here we go. So, update, deletes, and inserts. To execute these SQL statements, use the execute update, not execute query. And that's because execute query is designed not to do database updates. This is how you can help keep your code safe by making sure if you're only reading data, you're executing the query, not executing the update. That is one of the reasons why we've separated it. So, note the nested single quotes within double quotes in the following insert statement method. And that is, so we have insert into vehicle values, then we have double quote, single quote, plus VIN, plus, I'm sorry, you got that wrong. It's insert into vehicle values, then you have the parenthesis marks, then you have the single quote, then the double quote, which stops that segment of the string, so we can now insert the VIN number. And then coming out of that, we have to put a double quote to start the string up again, put the single quote, which will put single quotes around the VIN number that we're inserting, comma, again, we're going to do single quote, double quote, the make, double quote, single quote, comma, single quote, double quote, the model, double quote, single quote, and so forth and so on. Now, if you notice, year and price don't have the single quotes, and that's because those are not string values. They are numeric values and do not require the use of single quotes around it. And then we can run the execute update. All right, so now let's take a look at this next piece, which is adding Java, FX, and SQL together. Here quickly we have this fine gray, which we're about to take a look at, where we've added a label and some text fields, and then we've got a button that shows the grade, and we put everything together to come out with this nice little label that says Smith R. Jacobs grade on course database system is C. So let me pull this over real quick here so I can make sure I get the right number. We're going to go ahead and take a look at that fine grade. Let's run this real quick. And here it is. Now we're going to type in those numbers, which is 4, 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3. Show grade. There we go. So it works exactly as we expected. Now what's going on behind the scenes? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the actual the Java FX page. So and before we do that, we're calling this method called initializeDB. Well, what does that do? It establishes the connection. So we go ahead and create our connection. And to the console, behind the scenes, we're putting that the connection is connected. Now, I gotta be honest with you, when you're creating a Windows application, you're not going to typically do this, right? You're going to go ahead and do your database connections. You're never going to notify the user unless something goes wrong. And so this is more for our benefit for the example, but just wanted to let you know that in normal circumstances, we wouldn't output. Now, maybe your application might have a log going in the background. That might be a good place to put database connected. But typically, unless you're doing an information log, we don't output stuff when things go good. So that's just kind of a thought process there. And then we're going to go ahead and set up our statement, which right now we're going to create a statement, and we're going to assign it to this stmt as a variable. But that's all we're going to do. We actually aren't going to create the statement yet because we don't have enough information to create the statement. So let's go back up to this, our start. And as you can see, we're creating a button that says show grade. We're creating an HBox. We're adding a label. And and then we're also going to create some other pieces that go onto this screen, onto this scene. Excuse me, not screen. This scene that have everything to do with the JavaFX and how that looks. And again, if we run this, we can see the SSN, we can see the course ID. So we've got all of these pieces, including the actual text boxes. Now, we set on action, which we remember from our previous, that is an event listener. And here we go. So this is the meat of it. So when you press that button, we're going to grab the text from these fields, these text fields, and then we're going to build up our query statement. So here's our query statement. We're saying select first name, comma, MI, comma, last name, comma, and all these other columns from the student enrollment courses where student social security number is this and enrollment course ID is this. And this is an entire SQL statement. So I'm going to highlight that. Now the only difference here is we got to insert these variables that we got from our text fields in here. So this is us inserting that SSN. Now remember, because it's a string, we're going to do single quote, then double quote to stop the actual string, the select string. We're injecting the SSN. Then we're putting the double quote, single quote again to start up the string again, and then put the SSN. Put the single quotes around the SSN number. Same thing with course ID. Here is that single quote, and here's the ending single quote, along with the rest of the where statement. Now, as you can see, because we're pulling from several tables here, we have to do that join, which is happening right here. We can see that this join is joining the enrollment in the course table together, and this is joining the enrollment in the student table together. Again, basic SQL statement stuff. Once we've done that, we're going to execute that query and get our result set back. And then we're going to say, hey, because remember, our result set, even if it's only one record, it's not pointing to that first record set yet. So we have to say, hey, if rset.next, which in a sense this is saying, hey, if there's a row of at least a row of data in my record set, then do these next things. If this comes back with false, that means there's no records in the record set. It means they didn't return anything. And if that's the case, we still want to display something to the user. So in that case, we're saying, hey, not found. But let's say that it does find a record, at least one record, then that next will return true. We're going to go ahead and set up all of these pieces, the last name, the MI, the first name, and then we're going to build a text. We're going to build the status, and we're going to set the text to this first name, and we're basically going to do the data dump on this data we just pulled back. Now we're formatting it nicely so that way it's readable. Again, everything should be wrapped in a try catch in case something happens. So that's a simple way of seeing those 4 steps. So let's cover that one last time. So the initial DB does the first step. Where'd it go? Right there. Creates the connection. And technically it sets up for the second step, which is the create statement. The next part is in our button, which is the show grade. And here is that finishing up of the second step, which is to actually create the string and then execute it, which then it turns into the last step, which is to get the result set back. From there, we can iterate through the result set. So one last time, let's just go ahead and run this. Let's play with it. Again, we've got... And then let's try something like this. Not found. So there is where that rset next is returning false because no record sets came back. and that's why we're getting the not found. It's important to do those things because you don't want errors to occur, right? Sometimes records aren't found, and so you need to be able to handle that and do it gracefully and not have issues. If you were just to say rset.next and then try to pull data, if there's no data to be pulled, this would throw an exception, and that's not good. All right, let's go back to our notes here. All right, the prepared statement class. This class makes it possible to create parameterized SQL statements. Question marks are used to indicate placeholders for parameterized representing values. Now, I will tell you, and we're going to look at this here in just a moment, this is the preferred method when developing any kind of product that's going to be in production. And the reason why is parameterized SQL statements makes SQL injection, which is a known threat, and it's a known way for people to try to hack your system using parameterized SQL statements, makes it almost impossible for someone to use SQL injection, right? And I always will say almost impossible because whenever you start getting in the mindset of saying, hey, this makes it impossible for a hacker to do, you're setting yourself up for failure because hackers are known for making the impossible possible. So it's better always say, hey, doing it this way makes it much more incredibly harder for a hacker to do this. But please don't ever put yourself in a situation where you think you have outdone the hacker, because they will find a way to outdo you. That's the give and take and the mindset you have to have when it comes to security. Always consider that they will find something you haven't thought of. All right, so let's go ahead and look at that example because this is important and this is the preferred method on doing that. So we're going to use the find grade using the parameter prepared statement. Now, I'm not going to go too much into this except I want to show you the big piece on this. Now, the big piece on this is the prepared statement. So up here in our initialized DB, which we're used to from the previous example, we're initializing the database. We're going ahead and we're connecting. Again, we're simply putting out that the database has been connected. And then in this, we're creating a query string. But as you can see, it's a little bit different. We're not closing the statement, injecting our piece of information, and then appending the SQL statement. We are actually putting question marks where an actual value should go. So in this case, where student SS number equals question mark. As you can see, it's one continuous string, and for each place where we need a parameter, we're putting a question mark. Doing that, we can now say connection.prepare statement, and this prepare statement says, hey, we're about to give you a prepared statement, which means we're going to be using these question marks. Now, we go ahead and finish setting up, and when someone clicks on the button, things happen a little bit different. Now, we're going to say prepare statement dot set string, and it's the first value, so the first question mark is SSN, and prepared statement set string to course ID. Now, behind the scenes, this set string is looking for possible SQL injections and things like that, and so that's why it helps alleviate that issue. It makes it much more harder for the hacker to hack your database. But this is, like I said, using prepared statements, and it's the ideal way to do it. Other than that, nothing else is different. It's only that one statement. And to be frank with everyone, this is a lot nicer and easier to read. So I can read the statement. Also, you can pick the statement up and put it into a SQL tool, and now all you have to do is quickly replace these little question marks with the actual piece of data, test data you want to test, Easy peasy. You run it, it runs right, you switch these back to question marks, and you can copy it right back into your Java. It makes things much more simple in my mind. And then you're going ahead and you're setting up these prepared statements. Play with this a little bit. It's definitely worthwhile to understand it. All right. The interface callable statement. Now, I will tell you, in a lot of firms, my firm being one of them as well, we don't allow you to do inline SQL. Now, inline SQL is what we've been doing so far, where we make statements in our Java code. We make, and let's go back real quick, take a look at that. So, for example, even though we're doing this the right way with a prepared statement, this is known as inline SQL. This means our code is actually creating a select statement, and it is allowing for the select statement to be ran against the database. Again, the problem with this is you do still sort of open yourself up for the ability for not only for hackers to try to hack your system, but if your code was ever falls in the wrong hand, or if someone was able to reverse engineer your code, which is definitely possible if you haven't taken steps to stop that, someone can see your select statements, which gives away a ton of information about your database. In fact, it tells people what table names are, what column names are about your database. And again, any information you can leak to a hacker, the more prepared they are to hack your system. So with that being said, a lot of firms say, no way can you do inline SQL. You must make use of SQL stored procedures. We're going to develop these queries in a procedural piece called SQL stored procedures. And so that way you just execute the procedure. You don't actually make up a statement. And the reason why you do that is, again, it obfuscates a lot of what's going on behind the scenes and makes it more difficult for your hacker. Also, a lot of firms like SQL stored procedures because of the security model around SQL stored procedures. Nowadays, most SQL database engines provide just as robust security around the tables and columns, even down to a row. But again, it can be a lot to manage, where SQL stored procedures make it a little bit easier to manage, and you can grant execute permissions on a stored procedure to certain roles. And so it's nice. We're not going to get too much into it. Take a look at the test callable statement. It's an interesting way to look at what a stored procedure does. All right, now, a database metadata. Two interfaces in the JDBC provide access to metadata. The metadata is information about the database. It also can be information around a result set. So the database metadata, access to metadata regarding the database, such as driver name, driver version, etc. With the result set metadata, access metadata for a result set such as account, column names. You can use this to get information about a table, and what columns are in the table, how many columns are in a table. So again, here is the result set, get metadata, get column count. This is going to return how many columns are in the result set that you got back. Again, we're not going to go too much into this. It is something for you to play with, but that is not something you'll really be doing too much in the homework. All right, with that, that is what is going on in this chapter. The next video, I am going to go over the homework just a little bit. There's not going to be a whole lot of information about the homework, because really this does take and put together a lot of the elements that we did over this semester. And so you'll be creating a quick application that's going to return data sets. So I look forward to talking to you on that video.